Whenever we say the word criminal,
Hmm.
things turn darker in everybody's mind. With all that's happening around the country or the headlines in the newspaper, they're meant to scare us, kind of. So, how did you get into this?
Something like passion. Then we realized that he has not just been fooling the people around, posing as a doctor. He used to also pose as an officer, government officer.
How does childhood trauma influence criminality in people's mind?
The most neglected factor is the human factor, which is actually the planner behind a crime. For the first case, obviously, our director, Dr. Rukmini Krishnamurthy, she just told us that you have to deal with this case. We were not given an opportunity to say yes or no, whether you want to do it or you don't want to do it. It's your task. You have been appointed. Start. And that's how we actually started on the case. And the first case that we actually worked on was the case of a serial killer.
Today, we have with us Dr. Deepti Puranik, a criminal psychologist who has had over 1,000 cases, who has worked with the government of Maharashtra, who has worked with the police, who has worked as a private forensic specialist and an expert. Today, we want to explore a different side, a side which is a bit darker, a side where mind matters, and learn the kind of test it takes for you to be successful in any field. Welcome, Dipti. Thank you so much for being
Thank
with
you
us.
for inviting me.
So, first things first, criminal psychology, it just sounds dumb. Whenever we say the word criminal, things turn darker in everybody's mind. With all that's happening around the country or the headlines in the newspaper, they're meant to scare us, kind of. So, how did you get into this?
Something like passion. That's the first thing. When I look back, it was only the passion that actually drove me into this field. And also getting the right kind of opportunity. So I kept getting good opportunities wherein I could explore a lot of these aspects pertaining to criminal psychology or dealing with offenders, their mindset. So that's how the entire thing just began.
So, what kind of education do you require to be a criminal psychologist?
Basically, I've done my master's in psychology almost around 20 years ago. And then I was working with one of the orphanages for street children and for all. And then I joined the government of I was working as a scientific officer with the government of Maharashtra psychology department. So at present, because obviously at that time there were not a lot of cases courses when it comes to forensic psychology and all. However, now we have National Forensic Science University, we have Raksha Shakti University. Ample of courses have already started when it comes to forensic psychology. So students this day always have much more opportunities than what we had around 20 years ago to do a particular course in that field. So we were more exposed to all the fields of psychology.
So, at that time, as you said, that there was not a lot happening in the field of forensic sciences. So, when you got into the work, when you had your first case or when you had your first event, you can say, were you taken aback? What was your feeling? What went through your mind?
Okay, actually it was a team. So somewhere there was a kind of comfort, okay? I'm not alone who's doing it. Obviously we used to work in team. And for the first case, obviously our director, Dr. Rukmini Krishnamurthy, she just told us that you have to deal with this case, we were not given an opportunity to say yes or no, whether you want to do it or you don't want to do it. It's your task. You have been appointed. Start. And that's how we actually started on the case. And the first case that we actually worked on was the case of a serial killer. So there was a lot of trial and error. We had to prepare ourselves mentally to deal with this situation. And somewhere we were all very naive and, he thought we are too young to deal with the case as well, and so he used to also comment, this is your first case, no? Try. I'm so there, I'm a habitual, so I'm used to it. So, it was kind of obviously intimidating, but that was the opportunity, because unless you do it, you're never going to be prepared to actually start it. We just keep waiting. I'll be prepared, then I'll start with my work. That preparation doesn't happen. So it's like you just start.
So you have been a witness or an expert in almost all sort of cases, like call it serial blast, bomb blast, or a murder. So do you find any kind of pattern in all of this in terms of the mindset of the people?
See, I won't say a common pattern. Okay, when you look at different crimes, obviously there are different patterns that are seen. Sometimes when we look at specifically if we are talking about a blast, okay, bomb blast, and the offenders who are involved in it, there's a complete kind of a mindset which was being seen when there is lot of influence of other people on their lives, wherein it's obviously something like not pre-decided, but somehow they are so much into that process flow that they don't believe what they are doing is something that is wrong. While when it comes to others, for example, if you exactly take a case of a theft and all, where they know that stealing is a crime, yet it is my need, so I am doing it. There are habitual offenders who enjoy when they are stealing, or they just do it for fun. So again, that is a different kind of complete different set of the offenders. When you look at murders, sometimes many cases the murders have been because of revenge. It has been because of some personal enmity. Very, I would say 10 to 20% of times what I have experienced or what I have seen would be by people who are unknown. In almost 80% of the cases, people were known to the victim. So, there is a kind of personal relationship that is being shared with the victim, which has somewhere led to this crime.
So how does childhood trauma influence criminality in people's mind?
Okay, there have been ample of research which has been done in that area, and there's something that we call as cycle of violence. So when we talk about cycle of violence, it is like unless there is a kind of block, the cycle of violence continues. So as a child, I was being abused, I was traumatized, and when the trauma has reached to such an extent that I've just learned the same thing to be just incorporated on somewhere else. And that's how you look at that violence. So they have already become mentally and physically too violent to be, so they just kind of what we would say, do the same act again and again. So unless there is a kind of barrier which is created within this cycle, or that cycle is broken, it will continue. So most of the cases where we have seen childhood trauma, obviously childhood, in fact, around 50 to 60% of the offenders, specifically in heinous crimes like terrorism and all, have kind of background of child abuse.
Okay. So like there are times when people are committed for the crimes they didn't actually commit. And I think that must take a really heavy mental toll on their personality. So what happens to them? What kind of, toll do they feel?
See, I have personally not experienced it because my role is very different, wherein our work is to assess whether the person has done it or they have not done it, and to submit the report in the court. And then obviously the judgment would be taken. It is the honorable court who decides whether the person is acquitted or convicted. There are times when people are arrested. Whether they'll get convicted or whether they will be acquitted is a matter of time, because it takes at times ample of years for a case to actually come to some conclusion. So if we look at some innocent who has been wrongly accused, even an accusation of crime, has lot of trauma when it comes to that person, because they won't be able to handle it it's not easy to handle the entire process, because one, you have been blamed for something that you have not done. Secondly, when you look at, the society is actually going to kind of look towards you with the perception that you are an offender. They are not going to wait what the judgment is going to come, but they will their own opinion, judgment already made on you. Third, your family, which is very close to you, your family obviously gets affected by whatever these systems or whatever that event may have occurred. It doesn't affect one person, it certainly affects the entire family and as well as family dynamics and relationships. Fourth, when you go back, even if you go back as acquitted, will the society accept you or will they completely believe that you have never done it?
Yeah.
So it will have a long-term impact when it comes to your work, your job, your career. So if you look at it, the impact is extremely
Extremely
heavy.
So, like, you have worked with so many cases. Was there any particular case that changed your whole perspective towards the criminal psychology?
Perspective from which both ways.
Yeah, it can be any way, whatever. If there's anything that changed your whole, that, for example, you were going through a particular trend or a style, and that case came in which just changed you completely, and you started looking at things in a different style or a manner.
Share something very interesting that I learned in one of the case. So generally we say that with education everything is sorted, and education is equal to intelligence. So someone who is highly educated means that person is highly intelligent. That's how the correlation is. I met as one of the accused in a particular case, and when we were doing the entire case history and talking to him, like in general when we do case history, it's almost not half an hour, sometimes 1 hour, 2 hours, 2 days, it goes on and on. So we actually get in depth into what exactly happened and all, and this particular person had just his primary schooling. Okay, so doesn't even remember whether he has completed his he has even given his standard 1 exam or not. Secondly, if you look at his life history, he stayed in all dark areas, used to stay with drug peddlers, have even been somewhere grown in red light area, after which he's started taking up work. When he was arrested as a doctor. Okay, so for almost 15 years he was practicing as a doctor in an entire setup with having more than 200 patients every day. If you look at his educational qualifications, nothing beyond primary. Okay, he used to treat patients, he used to give them medications, and he was so famous that his arrest came as a shock to the entire area, that how can he be arrested? No one was ready to believe that he is a fake doctor. That much was, how famous he was and how much people wanted to come to him to get the Medicaid. Then we realized that he has not just been fooling the people around, posing as a doctor. He used to also pose as a officer, government officer. Have a, I think, red or yellow light on his vehicle, and just looking at that light, no one actually caught him. And he could survive on this for almost 10 to 15 years before getting actually caught. So that's what that's what gave a kind of perspective to me that, okay, we assume that education will make you intellect, but you need to look at other side, that it is ultimately the brain. In what direction that brain can get channelized, it is very important. And as society, as government, we need to relook at the entire, scenario and how we perceive people, how we judge people.
So even like when we talk about different cases, domestic violence still pervasive in India, right? But not many people come out and speak about it. So what happens in their mind? Why don't they come out? What goes through their brain?
Firstly, when we talk about domestic violence, it's something that is instilled in the mind that this is normal. There's nothing abnormal when we are talking about domestic violence. And, that itself stops people from reporting it. So they assume that ये तो होना ही था, so उसकी क्या complain करे? So they don't realize that it itself is a crime and that it should be reported. If I don't stand for it, no one else is going to stand for it. And that's one of the very important factors, that I don't believe something wrong is existing in the society, or that domestic violence is wrong, and when I don't assume it, obviously I don't act on it. Secondly, when we talk about intimate partner violence, there's a very important aspect, which is a kind of belief. Okay, when you are in a relationship, you are so emotionally involved in it that you are not ready to look at any of the wrong things that are happening with you. And so you just assume that it was just once or it was just twice and it will stop. You don't realize that it has been going on and on. And by the time you realize, it's almost too late to come out of that entire situation. And these are very common scenarios for people to realize.
So, don't you think all these victims, or there is something that can be done from the government angle to educate them?
See, when we talk about prevention point of view or sensitization programs, we need to conduct lot of sensitization program. Firstly, we need to start right from basics, what is right and what is wrong. People are not yet sure about what is right and wrong, and every time it gets questioned. So you need to start from basic when we are talking about educating people about their rights and all. So, there are programs that needs to be conducted, but at a massive levels. So it can't be like, once, generally we have, it's irony, but around 8th March, Women's Day, we will have lot of programs. What about throughout year? What about, education program? Not just, we need to have kind of programs which are for both genders. We can't just have for any one specific gender, because when we are talking about creating awareness, it needs to be created at all levels, not just at, we are talking about 2 genders. We need to go even beyond that. We have to have other, communities also to be involved in it. So when we are thinking about programs, it has to be at a various levels. When we talk about, again, India, it's huge. So you have to target rural audience, you need to target urban, semi-urban, different age groups. Programs
different cultures, different beliefs.
Yes, everything has to be considered, because otherwise, sometimes it may get a wrong direction and it will be interpreted in a very
So
wrong.
you have also been doing a lot of training sessions with the government, with the police, with the lawyers. So how have you seen the whole dynamics of psychology, of the criminal mentality change through the course of your 20 years of career?
See, when we talk about crime, certain common patterns have been seen, okay? And that obviously, one part of training program is to make the officers become aware of what are the common patterns that are seen. Now, when we talk about psychology of crimes, we don't focus just on the human being. We also look at analyzing the crime scene, the psychology behind a crime scene. So every crime scene kind of indicates the behaviors of the offenders. So you have to kind of link the behavior of an offender with the behavior of the crime scene. So right from there, we have to, give an in-depth training in terms of how do you analyze those crime scenes. Secondly, when we are talking about, crime, okay, the most important, and I keep repeating this again and again, the most neglected factor is the human factor, which is actually the planner behind a crime. We try to look for a lot of physical aspects which are obviously necessary to present in the court as evidence, but it is equally important that you analyze the brain behind that crime. If you don't analyze the brain behind the crime, you are obviously not going to get the right direction to resolve a crime. So, it's kind of...
So with all this training, the new technologies coming in, what do you envision for the justice system pertaining to the criminal psychology in the near future?
When we talk about the justice system, obviously lot of importance is being given to forensic science as well as to forensic psychology. One needs to have an in-depth understanding of the psychological disorders, because sometimes the crime that occurs, the person who has actually committed that crime cannot take the responsibility of that crime. So when we talk about criminal responsibility, which is very essential when it comes to, proving whether this person can be convicted or not for a crime, that's where the role of a clinical forensic psychologist is of utmost importance, because they can help to actually prove that yes, this person can be held responsible for the act that they have done. Secondly, also that they are able to understand what is happening in the surrounding. So when it comes to crime and psychology, there are ample of aspects or behaviors that have to be analyzed, and in future or even at present, obviously the system as whole is trying a lot to bring in these features. So there are many psychologists, psychiatrists who stand in court as expert witness to state whether this person can be, what is the psychological evaluation of the person, can he be held responsible for crime or not.
So when you talk about all these young people, is there any particular advice you would like to give all these young people coming in the field of criminal psychology, and how can they keep their personal life and the professional life separate?
See, one very important point is that you have to be completely non-judgmental, and you need to have lot on emotional control when it comes to dealing with offenders. Because what happens is when we are talking about, the crime overall, see, for example, when I hear a case of a rape that is happening, probably I am going to get carried away by. So at that time when I'm talking, it is possible that my emotions, my biases may come into picture. But it is not my role to actually convict the offense. My role is only to assess whether this could be the person who may have done that offense or not. So when you are dealing, you need to be completely non-judgmental. You need to keep your emotions aside, and there has to be that boundary which has to be drawn very clearly that, you can't take it back home. Because if I keep thinking about it all the time, I'll lose on my sleep and, entire. So you have to have lot of patience, looking at things in an objective manner, not to get carried away by a lot of pressures. So all these things, these skills have to be inculcated in them.
Thank you so much, Dipti. Thank you so much for sharing such insights, such thought-provoking insights, and to understand that there is a world beyond the normal work. There is a world where people work to make the lives of other people safer. So thank you so much for that. Thank you for being on this talk. And I wish you the best for your future cases and the training sessions that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.